Trevs Hockey Show. It's Trev. Sweet. Anyway, my forgiveness for being so late to this party, but 2021 NHL Entry Draft is in the books. I was going to do a video about round 1 yesterday, but I thought it makes some more sense to talk about both rounds when they're done, because day 2 is usually where all the activity happens, and that was the beauty of this year's draft. The unpredictability and the activity on day 1, not day 2, day 1. So automatically you thought day 2 was going to be full of announcements. We got a trade to make, or we got a trade to announce. You had some, but it wasn't nearly as busy as day 1 was. But either way, I want to talk about this year's draft, at least the top 5, since I predicted the top 5. And then we'll go over some of the trades that were talked about the last 2 days. Let's get her done. Now, the beauty of this year's draft, outside 1 and 2, was the sheer unpredictability of it. And it was exactly what everybody thought it was going to be. As far as my top 5, or as my 5 predictions went, I only got 3 of them right. So that alone should say something. But I'm not going to spend too long on each one. Let's talk about that top 5, or the 5 that I predicted. So your first no-doubter of the night, number 1, was Owen Power, getting drafted out of the University of Michigan. Now, I'm not going to lie, and this is not meant to be in any way offensive. Does everybody remember that Simpsons episode where Homer changed his name to Max Power, and he would sing his name in the tune of Goldfinger? That's what I think when I think Owen Power. Owen Power. Boom, boom, boom. Doo-doo-doo-doo. Anyway. No, there's really no yes or no if he's going to go back to Michigan for the season, or if he's going to at least try and attend training camp. There's no one way or the other. But either way, when a 6'6", 214-pound defenseman who has a strong offensive game and a very strong defensive game and is already being compared to Victor Hedman comes along your way, and you have the opportunity to take him first overall, yeah, you do it. Because you don't see something like that every day. And trust me, Buffalo's making moves. I think they're done losing. Finally. Number 2, your Seattle Kraken. Went the predictable route, Matthew Beniers. And I'm not going to say too much because I'm going to go over the Seattle picks in my next video that I'm making tonight. But the long and short of it, this is your Paul Kariya, essentially. He's your playmaker. He can play defense. He's got soft hands. He can skate. And he's being compared to Jonathan Toews and Patrice Bergeron? Come on. This is the second player drafted out of the University of Michigan. They showed up strong this draft. And that's about as far as the predictability is concerned. So Anaheim went outside the top 5. And for my own self, outside the top 10. In drafting Mason McTavish, number 3. I honestly didn't think McTavish was going till at least 12. But that's just me. But Anaheim needs goal scoring, apparently. And coming out of Peterborough, 29 goals, 42 points in 57 games. So that's not too bad. The red flag I have, and while he's gifted offensively, when you're being compared to Jeff Carter, which version of Jeff Carter are we talking about? Like the current Jeff Carter, or the Jeff Carter that, won LA a cup, or at least helped LA win a cup? Either way, it's a good pick for Anaheim. Like, really, I mean, if McTavish can afford the room to blossom, he might just do just that. And it can't be a bad thing for the Ducks. Jersey went the predictable route, and that seemed to be the theme of this year's draft, was draft and family. But anyway, Jersey drafted Luke Hughes at number 4. Most of the experts had him go at number 8. I kind of had him go at number 4, mostly for the family ties, the connectability between the two of them, between Luke and Jack. And whether he makes the club this season remains to be seen, but either way, you got yourself a good defenseman. It's just a matter of, is he going to make that lineup and learn a thing or two from PK while he still can? Or are you just going to rely on the brotherly instinct of Luke and Jack Hughes? Hard to tell, but a good pick for Jersey. Either way, how long till they get Quinn? I'm sure they're working on it. I honestly thought Columbus was going to go defense, but I didn't know that they were planning on retooling the team in one day. And we'll get to Columbus and how good a day good a weekend they had at this draft. But they drafted Kent Johnson out of the University of Michigan. There's your third player in the top 5 coming out of the University of Michigan. And it's not hard to understand why. Over a point a game in 26 games for the Wolverines. Guy's got amazing hands. He can move at top speed when he has to. He's good on one-on-one situations. And being, like I said, over a point a game, that'll be a great thing for Columbus moving forward, because they got a lot of things coming in moving forward. They're going to help get them back to prominence. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, whether or not Johnson makes the team in year 1 or not remains to be seen. But again, with these university guys, they have that option of going back for a second year. But that's your top 5. Like I said, I went 3 for 5. So batting 60% on your top 5. But as far as those goes, I didn't do too bad. Here's some other notes from round 1. For the one I got wrong, pick number 3, William Eklund. He went all the way down to 7th and was drafted by San Jose. So he didn't fall far. Not as far as Jesper Wallstedt did. And the fact that 19 other teams passed on him, I mean, 17 if you want to get technical, because 1 and 2 were never going to change. Wallstedt went all the way to number 20, right to Minnesota. Edmonton passed on him. Winnipeg passed on him. St. Louis passed on him. Wallstedt, I think, is exceptional note because he could be the difference maker as far as goalies is concerned in this draft. Arizona didn't have a first-round pick coming in. That didn't stop from coming to get one. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Columbus walked out with 2 on the board. So not a bad 3 on the board, sorry. It's not a bad day for them. And then there's that pick from Montreal. Number 31, Logan Malou, who specifically requested, don't draft me, in light of everything that he had been talked about before today. I'm not going to talk about it here. Not my place. Don't want to get involved. Montreal went and took him 31st. So he still made it to the first round, even though he didn't want to get drafted because he hadn't matured. Teach their own, I guess. But what does this say? Again, I'm not going to get too much into it, but something to be said here, I think. But we'll never know. I only got a few notes from round 2, just because after round 1, it's really just trading picks from here and maybe catching a big deal. Round 2 is notable for a couple of things. Number 1, Arizona, when they finally got into the draft with their own pick, which was number 37, they drafted Josh Doan. Now the name should sound familiar. That's Shane Doan's boy. So it's good to see that they're keeping it in the family. Love to see him crack the lineup. I really would. So that's a good thing for Arizona. Pick number 62. Chicago drafted Colton Dock That's Kirby Dach's younger brother. Again, the New Jersey started the trend, keep him with the family, but that wasn't all. Pick number 220, Colorado Avalanche drafted Taylor McCarr. That is Cale Makar's younger brother. On a day where McCarr got a nice extension. We'll talk about that in another video, but pretty sweet day if you're a younger brother. Let's talk about some of those trades. Now this was my favorite part of this year's round one day, was the trades. And I'll start off with the Flyers acquiring Rasmus Ristolainen from Columbus in exchange for Robert Hägg and 2021 first round pick and 2023 second round pick. Sorry, Sabres. Sorry. The Flyers acquired Ristolainen from the Sabres in exchange for Robert Hägg and 2 picks. So good for Ristolainen, getting himself out of there. At this point, all the guys that are supposed to come out of Buffalo, you kind of want to cheer for them. They need some good news. St. Louis acquired Pavel Buchnevich from the Rangers for forward Sammy Blais, a second-round pick in next year's draft. St. Louis has to get him signed. Here's the trick. I'm sure they can. I'm sure they got a game plan in mind. As soon as they can announce on free agency day, I'm sure they will. But I don't think it's a huge deal for Buchnevich or for the St. Louis Blues. But what kind of team is St. Louis putting forward is the question. Now this one almost stole round one day. Vancouver getting Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Connor Garland from Arizona in exchange for forwards Louis Eriksson, Jay Beagle, Antoine Roussel, and this year's number 9 pick, a second round pick in next year's draft, and a 7th round pick in 2023 draft. It's a good cap dump for the Canucks, getting rid of a lot of unwanted contracts, because Eriksson, come on, nobody likes him in Vancouver from a fan standpoint, and I don't really see why he wasn't bought out at some point. But hey, if Arizona's willing to take on the contract. But what kind of situation does this put Vancouver in now when OEL starts aging and not living up to that contract that he signed, what, a year and a half, 2 years ago? I mean, 8.5, that's a lot of money. But here was your trade of the day. Chicago getting Seth Jones, the 32nd pick, which was Tampa Bay's pick in this year's draft, and a 6th round pick in next year's draft from Columbus in exchange for Adam Boquist, this year's first and this year's second. Good trade by Columbus, considering they don't have to pay the extension that Seth Jones signed, that we're going to talk about in the free agency video. Columbus made out like bandits. Boquist isn't even in his prime yet. He hasn't even got 3 seasons under his belt. And he's putting up phenomenal numbers. So, Columbus isn't in the wrong for making this trade. Chicago, well, who knows what's going on in Chicago anymore, right? But Columbus wasn't done. They went out and got Jake Bean from Carolina in exchange for the number 44 pick, which was originally owned by Chicago. That second round pick that they got in the Seth Jones trade, they flipped that to Carolina for Jake Bean. It makes sense now why Seattle didn't draft Jake Bean, because maybe Carolina had this plan all along. But good for Columbus. I mean, it helps out their defense easily. I mean, it's not one of your top 2 pairings, but it's a start. It's a good start on defense. And then you had picks for picks for picks for picks, and Edmonton passing up on Wallstead, trading number 22 for number 20. Ooh, more picks. Then you get to today. And today, two big ones that were really worth talking about. Jacob Voracek going back to Columbus for Cam Atkinson. Philly dumped Voracek back to Columbus. Now Voracek is not the same kind of Voracek going to Columbus that he was when he left. He's past his prime. His good numbers are all got, and they were in Philly. So, what's Voracek's role in the team now? That's an interesting question, but I'm sure we'll get there and find out when we get there, right? And again, it was a lot of picks being traded up until you got to Florida, getting Sam Reinhart out of Buffalo in exchange for next year's first round pick, which is draft protected. So if it falls in the top 10, that turns into the next year's first rounder, and Devin Levi. So Buffalo's got themselves a goalie they can build around within a couple of years. So not a bad pickup for Buffalo. And they dump Reinhart, who wanted out. So no winners, no losers. The funny thing, and this has been mentioned many times with Florida, is they have 3 of the top 4 picks from the 2014 draft on their team right now. Eklund, Reinhart, and Sam Bennett. So that's an interesting little thing. Kind of like how, the top 2 picks in the 2011 draft. No, 2011. It's 2010, maybe. Tyler. Have both played for the Bruins at some point. It's an interesting little tidbit. But yeah, my reaction to this year's draft, the 2021 draft, it was not disappointing. Not even close. And I'm very thankful for that. It otherwise made for... It was good entertainment for what would have been a dull thing if stuff like that didn't happen. So that's Trevs Hockey Show. I want to thank you for tuning in. Don't think I don't appreciate the gesture, especially if you've given me 17 minutes and 40 seconds of your time. I do appreciate that very much, and what I would appreciate even more is if you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, because it will make you feel good, and we're so close to 100. Let's make it happen. All my socials in the description down below. Moving forward, we'll talk about the Seattle picks. But either way, in the meantime, and in between time, be looking for more videos from the Trev. Later.